Greetings. I am Dorothy Dowling, and welcome to It's Personal Stories, a hospitality podcast that highlights the inspiring journeys of leaders in the hospitality industry. We are a nonprofit organization dedicated to personal empowerment. I am delighted to welcome Dr. Callie McGuire, Managing Principal Hospitality at SaaS. Callie, it's an honor to have you with us today.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Dorothy. I'm really looking forward to the conversation. Thanks for having me.
Oh, yes, we're delighted to have you. So, Kelly, we always start with asking folks to give us a little bit of background on their career journey. And you have worked extraordinarily hard to earn your doctorate and are now in driving important growth at CS in the revenue management commercial leadership space. Can you share your career journey with our audience?
Sure, happy to do it. So I have a master's and a PhD from the hotel school at Cornell. And prior to the master's, I was in food and beverage. I ran restaurants. Most notably, I ran a Ben & Jerry's franchise in the French Quarter in New Orleans for just under a year before I joined the master's program. So I came in with this operational background, but of course, any degree is going to change your whole perspective. So I came out of the master's with a real passion for data analytics and technology, and my first intro to revenue management. So for a couple of years, I worked for a technology company that did kind of back office administrative support for food service organizations. And I was working at the time on one of the very first applications of software as a service, but we didn't even call it that at the time. We were talking about this hosted, centralized back office solution. So I learned a lot about how technology works and how it's architected. But I still had that underlying passion for revenue management. And my advisor from the master's program invited me to come back and work on the PhD, which was a personal passion of mine and also kind of a family passion as well. My father is a professor and he has a PhD, and I grew up in the environment. And so I like to say I kind of went in the family business. But while I was working on the PhD, I was building up all this expertise in kind of the analytics and technology side of revenue management at a time where all the conversations about big data and analytics were really amping up in industry. So as I was finishing the PhD, I realized that I had a real strong drive and passion to go back into industry where I could immediately apply some of these skills in this area, this super complex, but what would become very business critical area for hospitality. So I joined SaaS, which is an analytics company, and our mission there was to help SaaS sort of modernize the practice of hospitality revenue management. And this was in the 2008, 2009 timeframe. So it was right as we were starting to see, Expedia really gaining momentum. So the OTAs were on the scene. The transparency of price and industry had really shifted, and the revenue management systems, as they were constructed, were struggling to add value in this new environment. So I was part of the team that decided to acquire Ideas, the revenue management company, and worked with them for a bit on kind of, now that SaaS had our powerful analytics platform, we had all the industry expertise that Ideas brought to the table. Can we take out a white sheet of paper and reinvent how analytically revenue management is solved to meet what was happening in the market at the time? So that was super fun. I then expanded my role a bit. I became the executive director of our hospitality and travel global practice. So my role there was to bring analytics and data, use of data to industry, and also bring industry back into SaaS so that our solutions could better meet the need of industry. And I was traveling around the world evangelizing to the industry about the value of data and analytics. And that was really fun. I got to see a lot of different contexts around the world of how analytics was or could be used. I got recruited from there by Wyndham. And at the time, that was Wyndham Worldwide. So I was recruited into the destination network line of business, which was vacation rentals. And this was in around 2016 when Airbnb had hit the scene and this whole notion of alternative lodging was really coming to the forefront. And so that was the business that Wyndham was in at the time. And me and my team were building custom pricing solutions for those vacation rental lines of business, which was a really fun flavor of the revenue management problem that I got to kind of play around with. But while I was there, I got recruited and sort of an offer I couldn't refuse to join MGM out in Las Vegas and rethink from an analytical, but also organizational perspective, how revenue management was delivered in the casino industry. And that is a really tough offer to refuse because that business is absolutely fascinating. So I got to do that, 40,000 rooms in Las Vegas, all the ancillary revenue, understanding how you deal with casino segment against retail segment against the very powerful group and convention segment. Having a really good time doing that. And then MGM went through a kind of a business reoptimization. They eliminated 1,100 leadership jobs, and mine was one of them. So position was eliminated in spring of 19. And that was actually a great time to explore with the backing of my employment contract what I would do next. So I traveled the world. I took a little time for myself. And that's when I discovered ZS. And ZS's mission was similar to mine, what I've been wanting to do my whole career, which was how do we just continue to push the industry in their use of data and analytics? How do we help lift the practice of revenue management? So we lift the industry from that perspective. And that's what I've gotten to do ever since I joined ZS. Never thought I'd be a consultant, Dorothy, but life takes you on these paths and prepares you for it. And I ended up in a place that I love, which is a really great fit. So.
Well, and I just think your breadth and depth of experience, Kelly, I am sure your clients are incredibly appreciative of the subject matter expertise and just the contextual understanding that I'm sure you bring to helping them solve problems.
Yeah, well, that has been my mission, really. This is a very complex area. I was fortunate to have time and space in my career to really go deep, to study it, to understand the implications. And was strongly focused right from the beginning on breaking down that complexity and turning it all into very business accessible concepts. And so I'm pleased that I've been able to assist in that sort of personal mission in industry for the course of my career.
Yeah. Well, I know we'll talk a little bit more about that, but the one thing you didn't mention on your career journey was you're becoming an author. I don't know if you could share a little bit more about that.
Yeah. Thank you for that. And thank you for allowing the plug. So I got into blogging pretty actively when blogging was hot back in the early 2010s. And SaaS happened to have a program at the time that an arrangement with Wiley Books that they would, put certain SaaS folks forward to be an author. So I was encouraged by leadership to give that a try. And since I had a foundation of material, I thought I would. And so they asked me to put a proposal in. I thought I had one book in me. It turned out I had two, and went through the process of publishing. So I do have two books. The first is called Hotel Pricing in a Social World, and it is really targeted at revenue leaders and their peers to understand sort of the influences on modern practice of revenue management and how organizations should be thinking about approaching those challenges. And the second book is called The Analytic Hospitality Executive, and designed to do similar, sort of demystify the practice of bringing analytics and data-driven decision-making into an organization and how organizations can take advantage of that. And Dorothy, they're both still relevant. They're both available on Amazon. Make great stocking stuffers for your favorite hotelier. Just plug in that. But what's interesting, I'm going to take the opportunity. But what's really been interesting about both of those books, right? One, the internet reminded me the other day that I was doing book signings about 9 years ago for the first book. The second book came out about a year and a half, 2 years later. There's no mention of artificial intelligence in Hotel Pricing in a Social World. And there's half a paragraph in the Analytic Hospitality Executive. And that was less than 10 years ago. So when we think about what's happened in industry, I think I have another book or two in me, honestly. So.
I think you do. And I know there'd be many that would love to have that as part of their personal collection. So thank you for sharing about your authorships. I'm wondering if you've had a personal mantra that has helped really shape your personal career success, Kelly.
Yeah, I have always kind of lived by the mantra of be kind and be grateful. And I think about what those two words mean for every interaction that I've had. And that's been a longstanding, that my parents taught me that back in the day. And, we as a family, we sometimes make a little gentle fun of my mother for like overthanking. She's really good about thanking, but it instilled that as just sort of a natural fallback for me. And I can tell you, Dorothy, in my career, I have never once been criticized for overthanking. I think we don't thank people enough, and we're not grateful enough to those around us and the work that they do to help support us. So be kind and be grateful is how I approach it.
I think that's a beautiful mantra. So I would love to see your mother again. I know I had the pleasure of meeting her when you got the Vanguard Award, which I know we'll talk about soon. But I'm wondering if we can talk now more about career champions and people that have powered your career through their mentorship or allyship. So I'm hoping you might share some of that with us.
Yeah, for sure. It is. I was reflecting on this. I took, I think, a slightly different approach to what's traditional. That's worked really well for me. So I sort of have two comments on this. First, when it comes to mentorship, I think through my career, instead of having one mentor or one go-to, I sort of built myself a board of directors, as I like to call it, and that served me really well. So I have a handful of folks that I trust that know me from various aspects of my life, and I can call on them when I need advice or propping up that's in their specific area of expertise. And so whether it's navigating politics or bouncing ideas about industry solutions off of this group of folks, and that's really served me well. It's been very important. It also makes me feel like I'm not having to search out that perfect chemistry for a one-on-one relationship, which can be really tricky. So I've often encouraged young people that come to me asking about my advice on mentorship is to think of that kind of structure. It takes a little bit of pressure off both sides as you think about putting that group together. But I love that you said allies too, Dorothy, because I think that this is something that we don't always think of first. And an ally could be, a peer. It could be someone else in the network that isn't in that, that sort of mentor-mentee relationship. And I can tell you that to me, where that sort of reared its, where the importance of that was made most relevant was when I was at SaaS. A leadership role on the team opened up, and I hadn't been there that long. I was a little bit nervous about, my boss had asked me to help recruit for the leader. It was going to be the leader of me. And I thought, oh, this is great. I'll get to pick my leader. Like, this will be great. You do want that kind of influence. So I recommended a few folks and they had happened to fall through. So I was at lunch with some of my work peers and friends. And my friend said to me, well, wait a minute, Kelly, why haven't you gone for this job? I'm like, well, he didn't ask me. So, and I'm new and I'm not sure. And she said, Kelly, these jobs at this company don't come up that often. If you pass this up now, it could be years. We're a very flat organization. I think you need to challenge this. I think you need to go find out why you weren't considered for the job, put your candidacy forward and figure out what you need to work on. Worst case scenario, you get some good advice. I was absolutely terrified, but she pushed me, right? She pushed me. And I remember I had to call her like the 2 minutes before I walked into his office for the one-on-one. And I was like, what'd you tell me to say again? What'd you tell me to say? But, I screwed up my courage. I marched right in there and I said, Tom, I'm really interested in this leadership job and you didn't consider me for it. And I would like to know why. I probably said it like 1,000 miles an hour, right? I mean, just like terrible. I remember shaking, right? And he looked at me and he said, you know what, Kelly, I didn't consider you for this job. And I'm not sure why. I think you'd be perfect for it. And by the end of the next day, he had called his boss and I was in the role. So, it was the ally that pushed me into that, right? It was somebody in my peer group that I was sharing career challenges with that was really on my side, that wanted the best for me. And so, the power of that community that's around you, I think is critical. And there are also many other lessons about taking charge, always asking, that I've learned, but I'll never forget that moment. It was really, super impactful. And if I hadn't had that ally that pushed me, I don't know, I wouldn't be sitting here today, I don't think. So.
Well, those are both good stories for us all to learn from, Kellyanne. And I do know this formulation of a personal board of directors has gotten a lot of traction, particularly in the last few years coming out of COVID. And I think the way you contextualized it in terms of saying it allows you to have several people in your network that are giving you different perspectives and context to really support your career growth. I also love the way you talk about a peer being an ally to push you. I mean, many people, it's, a senior person that's speaking up for them in the room when they're not there, but just having someone that actually really thinks about you and your career and is able to, say it as well as she said in terms of what's the downside here. Worst case scenario, you're going to end up with some good career advice. So Thank you for sharing that, because I do think sometimes having others that push us and help us see how others might see us is incredibly valuable to all of us. Um, you've made some big moves in your career, and you've made some geographic moves as well as career decision moves. I'm wondering how you can, if you could share about how do you approach some of these major changes in terms of thinking about the risks that you're taking.
Yeah, I certainly have a lot of experience navigating through change for sure. To me, I as I made these switches, it was all very purposeful in terms of what I wanted to be doing, and I was super excited about these opportunities. But they did move me ping ponging back and forth across the country, many times leaving, communities and life behind. And I think, I try to do sort of two things in these big change situations: keep my focus on the excitement about what's coming next and why I made the change, and the positive on it, and then take it one step at a time. So everything is not going to be fixed the moment you land. You're not going to have the dry cleaner, the doctor, the dog sitter, whatever it is you do in your life immediately. You're not going to have, your big circle of friends, but one step at a time to kind of navigate through that. Of course, I have to keep reinforcing that one step at a time thing, because I'm like a super optimizer. I mean, I'm just like, I'm the worst of, everything has to be, planned out, nailed down. And not only that, but best possible, most efficient outcome, right? So I'm very tempted. I lay out all my one steps and I'm like, let's go, right? But it's good to plan in that way. But within that, you have to understand it isn't going to happen overnight. And there's going to be a lot of things you can't control that happen. And so another thing I do try to remind myself is the benefit of this plan is not so that we get everything done in the most efficient way possible. The benefit of the plan is we planned everything we know we can control so that we can handle the things we can't. Mm-hmm. And so that we can, navigate through, whatever the unforeseen or unintended would always be in a big change. So I think that's how I make it through.
Well, I think that's really great advice. I have also made a lot of moves in my career and made a lot of geographic moves. And I do think that one step at a time is really great advice, because it is very disruptive. Your entire life is, in a moment of change. And I love the way you reference the dry cleaners, because for me, it was the hair salon, the dentist, the doctors, all of those things that you have to reestablish. And it kind of destabilizes your life in some ways until you get all of that sorted through. So I do love the one step at a time. And I do love sort of putting a plan in place so that you can manage what you can control and be more comfortable with all the things that you can't control. So that's really extremely beneficial. So thank you for that.
Well, Dorothy, I'm famous for having flown from DC to Las Vegas for a year to see my stylist, because it was just too much change. It was quite an expensive haircut, but you know what? That's what I needed to feel good about myself, right? So, and I had some friends back there, so that helped ease the transition from Vegas to DC. I found someone fabulous here eventually through the network. But yeah, I did that. I did that.
That is an amazing story. So thank you for sharing. I'm wondering if you can talk about relationships, because you have nurtured a really amazing community. It is, I know, very intentional on your part, but I would love to hear how you have built and nurtured those relationships in your career.
Yeah, thanks, Dorothy. This is I love this question. My approach to building any relationship, but especially the professional ones, has always just been to be just authentic and approachable and genuine. And I just happen to be fortunate that I love what I do, and I love the people around me that do what I do and that I get to do this thing with. And so I am approaching every conversation with someone new that I could potentially build a relationship with, just genuine curiosity. And I leave myself open, to being able to have conversations about interesting things that are happening in their world, and to learn from it, and just I think just be really authentic about that interest. And I think that's always been important to me. Approachability is also important. If I lead with the pedigree, that can lead people to believe I might be in some sort of lofty whatever and harder to talk to. one of the biggest compliments I got, I wasn't actually there for, but I did the one of the lightning rounds at HSMAI early days, and my whole thesis was revenue management's awkward teenage years, and it was basically stand-up comedy routine. And my good friend Kathy Marr said that in the middle of the presentation, the person in front of her turned around to her and said, "That's the PhD." And I thought, that's exactly how I want to approach the world, right? Because I can't get in these really interesting conversations if people think I'm going to keep them at arm's length. And then I think the other thing too, we learned during the pandemic, but I sort of held this before, which is approach this as a whole person. I can be as equally interested in someone's personal life and share my own as professional. And I think that makes all of us feel more genuine and authentic, and it helps to build those connections. So I am liable to ask you about, your kid's ballet recital or the ski vacation you took, or how the new house is going, all of that stuff. And I've had some of my most fun conversations with people in the network over that.
Well, again, very brilliant thought leadership that you extended. And I think more recently to an HBR article about sort of executive career growth and how some, like, executive gravitas is something we've always spoken about, but just looking over the last few years versus what it used to be 10 or 15 years ago, that element of authenticity has taken unprecedented levels in terms of importance in leadership. So I think the fact that you had it early and that you continue to develop that through, the pandemic and other things, Kelly, where I think it's become more evident to all of us, I think that really speaks to the kind of leader that you are. So thank you for sharing that.
Thanks, Dorothy.
I would love
to model it for the teams. It's important to me to model it for the teams too. And so that's, we get a lot of jokes internally about, Kelly's icebreakers or whatever. But I do think, you got to get people relaxed and in the moment and learn that it's okay to be yourself and bring that into conversations. So it is something I try to do for the sake of my team as well.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. I'm wondering if you could expand on it a bit, because now as a consultant, obviously it's an important part of business development. So can you build some linkage in terms of how relationship investments really help you in terms of your consultancy practice?
Yeah. Every time you get in this realm of business development, you always run the risk of some of this feeling a bit cynical or self-serving. And I really, it is not for me. I'm fortunate now that I'm in this consultancy role that I can actually work with the people that I've been building these relationships with for so long and help each other in a way that I couldn't when I was just a peer and we have a beer and complain about, XYZ happening and what we could do to control it. But I think that authentic and approachable, when I approach professional relationships in my consultancy, helps me there as well. And just I try to make sure that the leaders I know that I am genuinely interested in solving their burning business pains, and I'm taking it just as personally as they are. And this isn't about building a book of business, but really about contributing back to industry and lifting their business and sort of the discipline as a whole, and that's helped. I don't treat these business relationships any differently. We learn about each other's personal lives. If we and as much as we get super passionate about what's happening in industry and how we can address it. So I think I bring those same techniques into the business development cycle. They know they're getting me. They know they're getting the real me, and bringing my background to bear. And then the teams that I build are committed to delivering excellent work for the clients as well. I mean, that's the interesting thing about consulting too, Dorothy. Like when I approached this, I was most nervous about business development because I've never been like a used car salesman type, like calling people for encyclopedias or vacuum cleaners. But one of the things that's really interesting about consulting is you really are selling the people. And people buy from people. So it is, and I can stand behind this product. Like I know what this is, and what I can bring to bear, and I know what stands behind me at ZS that I can bring to bear on the problem, and that makes it much more natural, and it can build sort of a genuine relationship to really push the business forward for our clients.
Yeah. Well, I think that's really well said. I do think that is the business of consulting, but certainly just your excellence in terms of your subject matter expertise. And I do think that humanity and just that commitment to service is something that really distinguishes yourself. So thank you for helping us shape sort of how relationships really power business success. I'd like to talk a little bit about HSMAI because, of course, that's how you and I got connected. And I think I shared with you, I don't know if it was last year or 2 years ago, I had the privilege of sitting in the audience at the sales conference. You were not there, but I know you had powered the lightning round that you referenced a few minutes ago. And I was dazzled. I was absolutely dazzled by the presenters that were on stage, just in the way that they were able to bring, such a relevant story in such a professional way to the audience. And there was a series of them, obviously, but several of the speakers spoke about you and how transformational you were in powering their communication skills. So I know I'm going a little bit off script here, but just your mentorship, your volunteer service with HSMAI, I would love to hear a little bit more about how you have really committed to volunteerism, your philosophy around it, and how that has supported your career growth.
Yeah, well, thank you for that nice compliment. That was I've taken some great personal joy from coaching those lightning round presentations. Communication and presentation skills have been a big part of my career. I've worked on it. I have taken a lot of classes in it, and I've honed my craft over time. And to your point, that is a good example of how I approach volunteerism. We all only have so many hours in a day, and I, if we're going to give back, to me it feels like you first of all have to have a passion for it, and then I love what I do. So HSMAI and some of the stuff that I support through HSMAI is a natural fit. And for me also, it's what skills do I have that could benefit others, that have benefited me, that are really, sort of easy and top of mind for me to apply to that situation. So again, the tie into the lightning round in particular, because of all the background I have, and that that communication in and of itself and presentation is a personal value and passion of mine, makes it really easy to give back. And as does, working side by side with all the amazing volunteers on all the initiatives we supported, whether it's the conferences or other educational opportunities. I saw your passion shine through at the Commercial Futures Forum the other week, Dorothy. So I know you're relating to this. But when I think about how that's benefited my career, and my career growth, the lightning rounds are a great example of this. I'm coaching here, and I meet 8 amazing industry folks that I'm building a relationship with through the engagement of working with them on this, and learning from them and from their perspectives as we construct these presentations together. And I get a lot of joy out of that, but I also make a bunch of friends when I do that. And I have a network that I can call on and that I can learn from. And that same goes for working side by side with, your peers, colleagues, and the future leaders that we attract at HSMAI. As you volunteer, you are starting to become a part of that community, and you have folks you can learn from, and you have folks that you can call on. And that's always been a real support system for my career. So it's a very virtuous cycle to be involved in that organization in particular. But that's I have a hard time separating the personal and professional, Dorothy, because I love what I do so much. I think the same would apply for folks who volunteer for causes they believe in any other sort of aspect of their personal lives as well.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think when you do have a passion, love, and that mutuality that you talk about, no matter where people are in their career journey, the kind of learning that everyone affords each other, I think that truly is some of what the richness of some of these opportunities that we have when we volunteer. I also would like to depart a little and talk about, had the privilege, as I said earlier, being in the room when you received the Vanguard Award. I love that your mom and dad showed up to, be part of that celebration of your career, Kelly. But I think that was a real testament to what you have given to HSMAI, but also just the brilliance of your subject matter expertise, because your brand and what you have brought in terms of thought leadership to the revenue management capabilities with HSMAI was really part of what was celebrated at that event. So I don't know if there's anything you'd like to expand on with getting the Vanguard and what that meant to you in terms of your career journey.
Well, I'll tell you, I remain speechless a little bit when it comes to this, because it was such an honor. I think that recognition and, the Vanguard Award is for career achievement in revenue management, and the fact that I was recognized by an organization like HSMAI and by my peers was just very humbling, and it was just a huge honor, and just an achievement. Again, I'm a little speechless about, and you can tell anyone who hasn't met me even by now, I'm usually speechless. But it really was truly an honor, and to be able to celebrate with the community, and especially to have my parents there who've been such great supporters of me, and have them, I talk about what I do all the time. They don't get it all the time, but they do. They got to see sort of me in the community, and that was very special to me as well. So it was just a tremendous honor, and really honor of a lifetime. I think so.
Well, if I may, I'd just like to thank you again for all of the great thinking and practice development that you've really brought to the industry through your subject matter expertise. I love being in the room and hearing some of the personal elements of your story too, Kelly, because I hadn't heard all of that before. So it was an honor for many of us to be in the room to celebrate this career achievement for you. So congratulations again.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I'm wondering if we can work on talk a little bit about work-life balance. A consulting career, I think, is one of the more challenging career choices in terms of finding balance, because you're serving multiple clients and often urgent things come up. And I know with your kind of service mindset, Kelly, you always want to do your best work for all of the people that you've invested time in developing and supporting in terms of relationships. So how do you employ sort of a healthy approach to finding some balance in your career?
Yeah, this is an excellent question. I am not an expert at this by any means, but I think, and a little bit of it is kind of what I said before, which is just, I find it difficult because of the passion I have for this to separate the personal and professional. Most of my friends are in the business. Like, I am famous for hosting dinner parties where all we do is talk about revenue management. It's really fun for us. It may not be fun for everyone, right? I was trying to list the number of people that I was close to that didn't work in the hotel industry, and I think I used one hand. So it is very tight. And that is, I think, to be honest, that's I think how I do maintain some of this balance, because my friends understand when I want to talk about work, and they pull me out of it when we shouldn't. So that's a piece of it. But I do struggle because, to your point, we always want to do our best work. We can always give a little bit more. I think for me, I found a set of non-negotiables that I hold on to, that I know center me. Exercise and movement is one. I'm a fanatic Peloton rider. And so I'm on the bike most mornings, or at least doing something that involves movement. My teams know. I'm an early riser, so it doesn't always have to be on the calendar, but they do know that if the text message isn't spelled right, it's because I'm spinning away trying to manage the phone. And then trying to make sure that I'm always, taking care of myself in terms of like eating right and getting sleep. And those things, I think, that allows me to at least approach intense work periods where I feel centered, where I feel healthier, and I feel like I'm in a decent mindset. And I very visibly support the people on my team. I talk about that I do this, and I very visibly support the people on my team if they want to carve out that time for themselves, because I know they'll come back better. I think that's crucially important. It's not a lot of time. It's an hour or two a day. It's maybe not even that, but at least I know I've got some routine that I know is good for me, that I can just approach the day a little bit more centered on.
Well, I think having some of those non-negotiables in terms of your wellness strategies is really empowering for all of us. Kelly, I have kind of gone up and down in that, but I do think it is making sure they are non-negotiable, and that you recognize that when you engage in those, you are so much more effective, and you bring so much more value to everybody that you touch. So thank you for sharing it. And also that it's a continuous struggle, because I think for many of us, that is our truth. So I appreciate you sharing that. We're coming up near the end of our interview, Kelly, and we always ask every advisor that's part of our network that, is there any final piece of advice that you would like to share with our audience that has empowered your personal success?
Yeah, no, I thank you for this opportunity, because as I was reflecting, thinking about our conversation on the mentors and the advice I've gotten in the past, one of my favorites that I use most often, one of my mentors said to me in giving advice about how to approach a situation, he said, Kelly, you need to run towards the roar. And, what he explained was the best way to scare off a lion is by running right at it and they don't expect it. And, now I've never tested this with an actual lion. I'm just assuming this is true. But I love that sort of mantra. It's like, what is the thing that's most frightening? And the bravest act that you can take is heading right for that thing. And so every time I'm approaching a difficult conversation, something I don't want to do or something that feels scary, I always think to myself, okay, we're going to run towards the roar. And I just even saying that to myself makes me feel more brave. It makes me feel more confident. And so that's my piece of advice is, and by the way, I was never eaten by the lion anytime I ever ran towards the roar. Right. But just that, so I would both encourage people to do that, right? Face the thing that scares you the most, face it head on and face it now. Don't put it off. And secondly, I would encourage you to say that to yourself because it really does help.
Well, I love that mantra of run towards the roar. It kind of makes me think of some of the Amy Cuddy work that she did in terms of her power poses to, put you into that superhero mindset. But I do think that is really brilliant advice to close out our interview with Kelly, because I do think having courage and maybe having that ally that you had in the back of your mind is, really what is the downside? The worst is you're going to get some career advice or a learning experience. And the upside is that you might be very successful as a result. So I just thank you, Kelly. It was delightful to have you on our show today. I love all the words of wisdom that you shared with our audience. And again, I am just so grateful for all the continuing contributions that you make to our industry. So thank you for your leadership.
Thank you, Dorothy. This was a real pleasure. I enjoyed the conversation. It was a great opportunity for me. And so thanks again for having me.
You're very welcome. So also, I'd like to thank our audience and just remind everyone, if you've enjoyed this interview, to please visit us on our website, itspersonalstories.com, where you will see webcasts and podcasts from other industry leaders like Kelly that will empower your knowledge and fuel your spirit. We hope to see you there.